right, good afternoon, everybody. We should have a few more people joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we have actually two speakers today. Just kind of happened that way. But our first speaker today, of course, is Rachel Dixon, and you might remember her. Yeah. Rachel not only is an alumnus of the history program, of course, but used to work right here in the library for how long?
Well, I worked for a year. And then I worked in the summers also. So.
Okay, in the summers and the year. So she knows her way around campus. She knows some of you. I know will probably remember her being here. She graduated in 2010. And after that, she went to the University of Kentucky, where she is studying history, modern Germany. She'll tell you more about it. But we wanted to invite her here today to speak to our applied history, and of course it's open to anyone else who wants to come. And that is to speak about life after KCU and life in graduate school. So we'll turn it over to Rachel.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Dr. Wineland said, I am Rachel Dixon, used to be Rachel Morris here at Kentucky Christian. I'm a second-year master's student in modern European history at the University of Kentucky. I'll be graduating in August of this year, as long as I get my thesis done, but more on that later. So, I made this PowerPoint just for you. This is an outline of what I'm going to be talking about. Let's move on. All right. First thing I want to talk about. How many of you are thinking about some point in your lives going to graduate school? Raise your hands. Great. All right. My first, probably most important piece of advice is take some time and think about what you want to do. What are your goals? Can graduate school help you achieve your goals? What kind of program can help you achieve your goals? There are lots of different kinds of programs, not just regular history, like what I do, but if you want to work in a museum, for example, maybe, not always, but maybe for working in a museum, you should do a historic preservation program or a public history program. And there are programs out there that are just like that. So, what are your goals? What kind of program can help you achieve them? Another one, what's the job market like? I'll tell you, at the moment, sort of depressing, but graduate school takes a long time, so if you start now, maybe it'll be better when you get out. But think about what the job market's like. I want to do X. Can I actually get a job doing that? Okay? Another one, are you properly equipped for doing a program that you are thinking about doing? If you want to study modern German history, like I do, it would really help if you can read German, okay? Because if you're doing history, you need to read primary sources. And as history students, I hope you all know what those are. If you're studying Germany, they're going to be in German. Okay, that's just an example. Okay. Another thing, if you're studying a foreign country, sometimes your graduate program, your advisors will want you to have traveled to that country at some point so you can learn about it sort of experientially, so you can see what are the contemporary issues in the culture. Okay, so things to think about. Are you properly equipped? Another big thing, are you prepared for potentially long-term commitment? All right, if you want to do a master's program, it can take around 1 to 3 years, hopefully not more than that. PhD programs often take a lot longer. And I found this chart. Completion rates of doctoral programs by discipline. If you want to study some kind of history, that would be here. In the humanities, about 49% complete within 10 years. Okay? If you're using a foreign language, it'll probably take you a little bit longer to finish a PhD program. Okay? If you're studying American history, maybe it'll take you 5 years. It just depends on several factors, such as funding, which I'll talk about in a moment, How long does it take you to finish your dissertation? If you're only using English, if you're doing American history, it might not take you as long. Okay. All right. It can take a long time. Okay. And it can be expensive, especially if you're out of state. You want to go to the best program. It might not be in the state that you're a resident of, so you have to pay out-of-state tuition. There are ways to get out of paying tuition, and the best way is an assistantship or a fellowship. What's an assistantship? Something where you do some kind of work, and in exchange you get a tuition waiver and a stipend is a paycheck. Okay, so some of my own personal examples. I was a research assistant last semester for a Russian history professor. Now, I didn't do research for her in Russian. I worked in the front office because she's the chair of the department. But with my research assistantship, I didn't have to pay tuition, and I got a stipend. Okay, and I worked like 20 hours a week. This semester, I'm a teaching assistant. This means that I work for a professor, I attend the lectures that he teaches for one class, and then I meet with smaller groups of students, like 25 students, and I have 3 sections of these, and I go over primary source documents with them. I grade all their exams and papers, and so on. Okay, it's a lot of work, which, by the way, graduate school is a lot of work, and if you want help paying for it, it's going to be a lot of work also. Okay, graduate assistantship, sort of what I did last semester that I called a research assistantship. It was more like a graduate assistantship because I wasn't actually doing research, but that's just where you have some kind of job. There are different kinds of assistantships, graduate assistantships, like you could work for some kind of office in your school somewhere, maybe not in the history department, in other departments, okay? A fellowship, you don't really do a job to get those. You just are sort of awarded a fellowship. I guess it's kind of like a scholarship. Those are a lot harder to get. They're a lot more competitive. Also, depending on your program, they may only accept people that they can offer assistantships to. This isn't the case for every program. University of Kentucky, for example, although this is changing, they will admit people without offering them assistantships. So, brings me to the next point. Work study. I was a work study for the first year that I was in graduate school. I just worked like 10 hours a week, and I was married, I am married still. So my husband worked, and that's how, we made ends meet. Some people work full-time jobs. Some people actually are professors already while they're still in graduate school. One of my fellow graduate students teaches at Lindsey Wilson as a professor while he's working on his PhD. So just keep in mind, graduate school is expensive. There are ways to help pay for it. But they're competitive, and they're a lot of work. So good to know. Where to go? I already talked about this a little bit. Like I said, there are different kinds of programs. You need to think about what you want to do. What are your goals? Like I mentioned, history, historic preservation, public history. If you study just history, you can do specializations within that, such as sort of a regional one like German history, or more broadly, European history, American history, or medieval history. Or you can do sort of topical programs. It just depends on what the school offers. So you can do topical programs like the Atlantic world, or military history, or gender studies, or one school in Vermont has a Holocaust studies program, for example. Okay? All right. Next, prestige. The name of the school doesn't always matter as far as getting a job, getting funding opportunities, but it's definitely something you should consider, because you're going to have to find a job after you finish, and sometimes the name of the university you attend can really help. Also, better programs they often offer more funding opportunities, not just for paying for the school, but also for doing research. Okay, so if you do a PhD in French history, you're going to need to go to France and go to archives and do research, and that costs money. So you want to go to a school where they have funding opportunities for that. Okay. Similar is advisor. What does an advisor do? Well, they're sort of they advise you, okay? You have a main person who you go to. They, sort of like here, Dr. Wiley and Dr. Coleman, one of them, if you're a history major, is your advisor. They sort of help you pick out courses, but they do a lot more than that in graduate school. They direct your research. If you're doing a master's in history, most of the time, if you want to keep going, you'll write a master's thesis, which is a giant research paper that's 80 to 120 pages. That's what I'm doing. So my advisor, Dr. Albacetti at University of Kentucky, he does German history. He's my advisor. He helps direct my thesis. And then once I'm finished writing my thesis, I'll sort of turn it into him and a couple other committee members, and then they'll read it, and then we'll all meet in a room, and they'll pick it apart for like an hour, and I have to defend it. And he's sort of at the head of that committee. Okay. Okay, so another point on where to go. Think about community. Some graduate programs have a really positive, supportive community. Other ones maybe are more serious. I mean, graduate school is serious, but they're more, what's a good word for this? More intense, maybe. Just not as not as much of a warm environment, maybe more competitive. Students are competitive with each other, not very nice or helpful to each other. It just depends. A good way to find this out is to contact graduate students who are already in the program. A lot of times you can just figure out, okay, who would be the best to study. I'm just going to keep using modern German history because that's what I do. Who would be the best to study modern German history with? Well, maybe University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Great school. They have some great German historians. So you would go to their website. You could find maybe one of the professor's pages, and on their website, I know they sort of list, what they do, books they've published, and then some of their graduate students. And they'll have their contact information. So if they don't have like a list of graduate students for you to contact, you can just email them and say, I'm thinking about applying to your program. Could I talk to some of your graduate students to figure out what the program is like? Okay. University of Kentucky, I think, is a really warm and positive environment. A lot of graduate students are friends with each other, and that's really helpful. A place like University of Chicago or University of Michigan, from what I hear, it's not really like that. It's a lot more competitive. It's not as much of a friendly environment. So think about that. Think about what you want. Would you thrive in that kind of environment, or would you rather go somewhere where it's more friendly? You can find this out by visiting the school, but especially by contacting graduate students who are in the program. Okay. All right, so similar to that, I want to talk about support and resources. Like I said, talk to graduate students, figure out what kind of community it is, because you're going to have support, hopefully, from your graduate student colleagues. You're going to be taking classes with other graduate students. If you're a teaching assistant, there'll be other teaching assistants. You can kind of commiserate. Okay, so HGSA, what's that? At University of Kentucky, for example, there's the History Graduate Student Association. This is a way for students to be represented within the department. So whenever all the history professors have a meeting, a history graduate student attends, takes notes, and reports back to the other students. And we usually meet at like a restaurant or something. It's also a way, it's like a social thing Like I said, we meet at restaurants. Sometimes we do kind of activities together. We're getting T-shirts, sort of like the Herodotus Society here. Okay. Let's see. Put the word cohort up here. We don't have a thing called a cohort at University of Kentucky, but I've heard some graduate students at other schools say they have a cohort. I think it's just sort of students that you come in with, and you're sort of in a group. You're in a group together, and you are become close friends or colleagues with them, and so cohort. But we kind of have that at UK because I have students that I came in with that I TA with, and we're friends. So it's something similar. Okay, moving on. Resources. If you want information about graduate school, a particular topic that you are interested in studying, a great one is HNet. Does anybody know what HNet is? Anybody ever heard it? Dr. Wineland knows. Okay, well, I'll tell you. It's sort of a listserv. It's an email-based communications network, and it has several discussion networks on different topics. There's even an undergraduate one, so all you have to do is you can just Google HNet, and you can sign up and get information about undergraduate concerns or topics. I don't know, I wasn't on the H undergrad, but I'm on H grad. Okay, so I receive emails about activities for graduate students, concerns, sort of everyday life concerns about being a graduate student, and people just kind of communicate via email on this listserv. You can also do ones that are topic-based, so there's one that's H genocide, so you receive sort of book reviews, and people have discussion topics, and you receive this all via email, and you can just read whatever ones interest you, delete the ones that don't, and there are probably hundreds of different topics. So whatever you're interested in, it's a great way to find out what people are talking about in the field. Okay, so what are popular topics in the field? What books are coming out? What do people think of them? Stuff like that. Another one is Grad Cafe. This is a great resource. It's just sort of a message board. It is a message board for graduate students of all different disciplines. So you can go on there and just see what other students are experiencing when they're applying. People offer great tips on, how to write an application letter, how to talk to your advisor, how to get letters of recommendation, what to do after you finish graduate school, about qualifying exams, which are, okay, I'll get into that in a second. Just different topics and concerns within graduate school. And you can see what other people are going through. Okay, a couple other ones. The Chronicle of Higher Education and the American Historical Association. The Chronicle, it's an organization. They put out a periodical, a newspaper, I think weekly. And they have a great website that has a lot of information about the field of history. Or, no, Chronicle has about just higher education in general. Okay, so you can get a lot of great information. You can look at job postings there, see what kind of what kind of positions are open. Lots of great things on their website. You can just Google Chronicle of Higher Education. The American Historical Association is this big organization that you can become a member of. They have a conference every year. They have a lot of resources on their website. You can check it out. Very important resource is your WISE professors. They have gone through graduate school. They are very knowledgeable. They are a great resource here at the University of Kentucky, here at KCU. Okay. All right. Some of you are probably wondering, what do you actually do in graduate school? Well, just like at KCU, you take courses. In the United States particularly, you take courses. There are different kinds of courses you can take. I can really only talk about the ones at UK, so I'll do that. A main type of course is a readings course. And in these courses, you read a lot of books, and then you come in and talk about it. It's sort of like a really academic book club. But, so for example, I took a class with Dr. Hang Nguyen about U.S. foreign policy in the 20th century, and we read one book every week, and we met once a week to talk about the book that we read and sort of did a critical analysis of it together in class, talked about what we thought was good about the book, what we thought was bad about the book, what major questions in history does the book address, things like that. The courses that you're probably used to as an undergraduate are a lot of probably lecture courses where you're just sort of taking in information. In graduate school, you need to be putting out a lot of information. Okay? Really, you need to be able to think critically, analyze, stuff like that. Okay, research. You can also take research seminars. You know, if you do a master's at UK, you have to take at least one. And this is a course where all you do is write a research paper. And you meet in class, maybe not every week, but every couple weeks, and just talk about the progress of your research. There's a professor sort of overseeing, making sure you're on track, offering suggestions. And by the end, you produce a research paper that's probably 25 pages. Hopefully, it would be publishable. You can publish it in an academic journal. That's what a research seminar is. You can also take undergraduate courses. As a graduate student, I only had 3 years of German at the high school level when I went to UK, and I wanted to do German history. It's kind of problematic. So I've been taking undergraduate courses in German to help with that. Also at UK, they have mixed classes of undergraduates and graduates, and they're usually lecture-based, but the graduate students do a little bit more work, like write longer papers or something. Okay. Another graduate student activity is conferences. At a conference, there are a variety of kinds of conferences. A conference is a place to present your work and hear the work of other scholars. There can be undergraduate conferences. I believe you can present papers at the Phi Alpha Theta conference. There are graduate student conferences. UK just had our annual graduate student conference called the Blue Rat Symposium, and we brought in a couple keynote speakers, professional historians who have written books to come in and talk about their latest work, and then most of the conference was graduate students presenting their research. And they present it sort of 3 at a time, 3 on a panel, and then a professor offers some comments on their work, what they presented, and then the audience can ask questions. So you get feedback on your work when you present. There are other larger conferences like the American Historical Association Conference, which sort of is about all kinds of history. I recently went to the German Studies Association Conference, and all the papers were about German topics, history, literature, film, things like that. And there are ones on specific topics. They're usually smaller. We at UK hosted one on war and gender, and we brought in probably 9 or so scholars to talk about war and gender. They've done original research on war and gender, presented about it. There are ones about photography, history of education, basically anything that you could think of. Besides conferences, ones that aren't up here, you can attend things like seminars and workshops. I recently did a seminar at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I went there for about a week and a half, had to apply and get accepted, and we studied some primary sources and talked about different topics. Basically, it was a way to just learn more about a specialized topic, and it's a really good thing to do because you learn a lot and you can put it on your academic resume, your CV, and it shows, okay, I've done this. And then you can also do workshops, which is sort of like doing a research seminar outside of your university. So maybe you have a work in progress, you're working on a book or an article that you want to have published. You can go to a workshop and meet with people and get some feedback on it. You can find out about all these things, conferences, seminars, workshops, things like that, from places like HNet. So now I'm ready for some questions. If you guys have questions. Yes?
I'm getting ready to graduate in the fall, so would you recommend me starting to look at the schools right now, or what, talking, emailing under the students and stuff, see if that's the school for me, or do you think I should just wait till next semester?
It's never too early to start talking to people. For history programs, most of the application deadlines have already passed. People have already heard, for the most part, what schools they've gotten into. So it would be difficult if you wanted funding, especially, to go this fall. Sort of a long process.
I graduate in the fall next semester, so I'll be starting in the spring.
Okay, a lot of programs won't let you start in the spring. Some do. University of Tennessee, you can start spring semester, but most history programs, from what I know, they have you start in the fall semester. So make sure you take the graduate record exam.
GRE?
Yeah, the GRE, which I believe you have to do if you're a history major here, that or the LSAT. Find out what the application requirements are. Talk to people who are in the program, professors. It's not too early to do it. I mean, the department's not going to change that much from now until when you apply. Great. Yes?
What are your hour loads for each semester, or your minimum or your maximum hours?
Well, there's no limit. You can work as much as you want. It depends on what you're doing. If you have an assistantship, that takes a lot of time, because you have to, if you're a teaching assistant, you have to prep for class, teach class, attend lecture, things like that. As far as how much time you put into your readings courses and research, you usually only attend once a week to a readings or research course, and actually a research course, hopefully the professor won't make you go every week. You just meet every once in a while and do research, but it takes a lot of time. Graduate school is a lot of work. It's not the kind of thing where you clock in and clock out.
I think I misspoke there. When I meant hours load, how many classes would you take a semester?
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Another good question. Full-time in graduate school is 9 hours. If you have an assistantship, 6 hours is full-time. I wouldn't recommend only taking 6 hours because you will take longer to get done, but it is a lot of work, but 9 hours is full-time. So each class is usually 3 hours, 3 credit hours, so 3 classes. Other questions? Yes?
How do you start asking about assistantship from a better school?
Well, a lot of times schools have the information on their websites. If you go to the graduate school page, some schools don't have good websites, but usually the ones with really good graduate programs, they do, and they'll have a lot of information on there. A great person to contact about things like assistantships is the DGS, the Director of Graduate Studies. They have all the information they can answer most of your questions. So, and usually you can find out who the DGS is just by calling the main office, the main history department office, or it'll say on the website who the DGS is. Great question. Other questions? Yes?
You said about the person teaching in Lindsay Wilson. Is that do a lot of people do that? Just teach undergrad, teach at a college and then go get their master's at other schools, or is that just?
That person's case is, I think, fairly unusual. Most people have assistantships, but it is more common when someone is ABD, and ABD means all but dissertation. When you do your PhD, you take courses for maybe like 2 years, and then you do this thing called qualifying exams where you have to read like a couple hundred books and then take a written test about it and then a verbal test about it with professors. After you finish that, all you have left to do is your dissertation, which is basically a book, probably like 300 pages. And while people are working on their dissertation, sometimes they teach at a college. Other questions? Okay, well, if you think of questions later, I'll be here for a while today. Feel free to ask me.
Can you tell us what the difference is, say, between being here and at UK? What was the transition like to going from a small campus in a small town to a big state school?
That's a great question. In some ways, it is sort of similar. At KCU, you have really small classes, and in graduate school, you also have really small classes. You're not going to have big lectures. But in other ways, it's very different. The history department has probably 36 professors of history. There are just a lot more professors. There are a lot more students. So that's a major difference. You do a lot more reading. And I think that would be a change, not just from KCU, but any undergraduate institution to graduate school. You just do a lot more reading. Like I mentioned, that one class where you read a book a week, well, that's just one class. You could be taking another class where you have to read 2 books a week and come in and talk about them. So you have to learn to read quickly. I would say that was probably a major difference. Another big difference is maybe expectations. At the graduate level, professors have a lot higher expectations, and hopefully you have a lot higher expectations for yourself because of what you're trying to achieve. Okay, if you're getting a PhD in history, you're trying to become a scholar. It's a lot different. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Has there been a difference? I mean, what kind of colleges are the other students coming from? Do they wonder about the school? Have they heard about this school? Has that been an issue?
Oh, as far as like coming from a small liberal arts,
small Christian
private
liberal
Christian
arts college?
If you have a strong application, then it wouldn't really hurt you, I don't think. I don't think coming from KCU really is a problem. Maybe some professors might see, some like graduate admissions committees might see the name Christian on your school, and that might raise some eyebrows. But if you have a strong application, if you're a good writer, if you turn in a really good writing sample, if you have good letters of recommendation, good GRE scores, it's not going to hurt you. Now, there's somebody coming, and if you have like a lot of language skills, that really, really, really helps your application too. Other students from KCU have gone to graduate school, really good graduate programs. Gerald Dyson, who some of you might know, he went to York. He finished his MA there, and he's applying to PhD programs. So don't let coming from a small private Christian school hinder you, because it doesn't have to. Just turn in a strong application, work really hard while you're here, and you can succeed and go far. So, yes.
How important, I know certain schools require a certain score in your GRE, like, how important is it to your, like, for you? Like,
That's a great
because
question.
some schools seem to, like, not care as much as others. I don't.
Right. It depends. As far as I know, GRE scores of graduate students can affect the ranking of a school, and so some professors might care about it more than others. My scores were mediocre, and I think that has hurt some of my applications, honestly, for PhD programs and for when I applied for my MA. If you don't do that well on the GRE, I would recommend retaking it. and maybe study a different way. It's a different test now, actually, from when I took it. So, I mean, really high scores are not going to hurt you. So, if you're not satisfied with your scores, I would suggest retaking it, because it can also not only increase your chances of getting into a program, but also getting funding either from your school or from organizations. Like if you want to do research or get an outside fellowship, you can get fellowships outside of your program also. So pretty important, but some schools, their admissions committee may not care about it that much. It just depends. A lot of factors go into your application and what gets you in and what doesn't. So.
We actually had Gerald speak a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right.
About his experience and so forth. He told us some of the places he was looking for a PhD, and one of them was UK.
Right.
What kind of places have you been looking, and what's sort of your MA thesis about?
Oh, right.
You've been working on your MA thesis.
That's right. Okay. Like I said, I study German history. I'm especially interested in German history after 1945, especially East German history. So what I'm writing my thesis about is conscientious objectors in East Germany. So, yes. I think it's a really interesting topic because, well, there's lots of reasons. I don't want to get super into it because most of you maybe don't know that much about it. But when you're picking a master's thesis topic, when you're picking any research topic, you need to think about unanswered questions or gaps in the field. What have people not written about? Find something that you can write about that can maybe answer a question, like what kind of dictatorship was East Germany? Okay, so I'm studying conscientious objectors. Maybe that can tell us something, hopefully, new about East Germany. That's what my research is about. Yes. So, yes.
What's the application process like to get into your master's? Like, what all you have to do, like the stuff that you're required and everything?
That's a great question. Some programs will require that you have language background. Mostly not from what I've seen, but it really helps, especially if you're doing American history, then you don't really need a foreign language. Okay, so the main things are GRE, you have to take it, have your score sent there, letters of recommendation, usually they want 3, an application letter. Have lots of people read your application letter. It's sort of a purpose statement saying why you should get into the program and why you would be a good fit there. This is why figuring out what a really good program is, what you want to study. You can't just go to graduate school because you like history. You need to have something that interests you, at least some kind of topical or regional interest, because that's going to help you. You need to explain why you would be a good fit in your program that you want to get into. So that's what you address in the application letter. You would say who you want to work with, what you've done, what has prepared you for graduate study, and so on. Usually you have to fill out just a basic application with your demographics. I think that's basically it. But whatever program you're applying to, check their website. That'll have all the information on what you need for an application. And Grad Cafe is a great place to figure out how people write their application letters. Sometimes you can post your application letter on there and people will check it for you. But it's a really good idea to have professors check it. That's most of what you have to do. Yes?
The letters of recommendation, what would be good people for them? Obviously your advisor would be one, but
Yes.
for the 2 other people, would it be just just like an old high school history teacher or someone who knows you personally?
I would recommend getting other scholars. I would just get other professors. So whoever your advisor is, maybe another person in the department. It's harder at a smaller school because there's not as many people, but someone who will write you a good recommendation letter. Ask them, do you think you could write a positive letter of recommendation for me? And if they say no, then don't get one from them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from the history department. Dr. Starr wrote one of my letters. If you know maybe a professor at another university who can help you. I didn't when I was at KCU, so I didn't do that. But okay, so I studied at the Holocaust Museum for a little while, and there's a scholar there who, if I asked him, I'm sure he'd write a letter of recommendation for me. And maybe, I think sometimes that might strengthen your application because the admissions committee can see, that you've networked, that you know people outside of your institution. It's kind of hard to do from here. I didn't do it. I didn't know other scholars. But I would mostly recommend other professors.
Yeah, most of those programs want you to have 2 or 3 letters.
Right.
And so, obviously, Dr. Coleman or myself could be 1 or 2 of those, and then another professor you've studied with here,
Yeah.
perhaps. And of course, if you do make, like she said, contacts somewhere else, that would obviously be something stronger.
Yeah.
If you could get someone who's a professor at another school.
Right.
But difficult to do coming from an undergraduate.
Yeah, I think maybe not just coming from KCU, but any undergraduate, they don't really engage with other universities usually.
It would be hard to get to know a professor well enough,
Right.
unless you had some personal relationship or you were involved in some other kind of research, a semester abroad, an internship.
Semester abroad, yeah.
Those kinds of things would perhaps introduce you to other people. Do we have any other questions? Then we have one more.
When you're looking at your finances for it, is the grad school helpful in helping you find those avenues, or is it something that you're on your own to find whether it be government money or institutional money or anything like that? Are you on your own, or is there an office that you can go to and say, hey, what do I do?
That's a great question. A lot of times when you apply, and the school offers funding, which they will offer to at least some of the students, you sort of you maybe like check a box on your application that you want to be considered for assistantships. And then when you apply, sometimes they'll just offer you an assistantship. If they don't, you can you should try to find other ways of getting funding anyway. Sort of hard to do. You just need to just kind of figure out what's out there. You can talk to your professors and see maybe what are some outside organizations that offer fellowships. I could look at sort of German history organizations of various kinds and see if they offer some kinds of funding. Those are some things that you have to do on your own. But as far as getting it from the department, they will help you with that. And a lot of times if you get funding, you stay funded. So I wasn't funded my first year, but my second year I have been funded. And if I would continue at UK, I would continue to be funded there. Now, funding has a limit, by the way. I showed you the how long it can take to do a program. Funding, they're not just going to keep funding you for like 10 years. A lot of times funding has maybe like a 5-year limit from your university. They only pay for your tuition and a stipend for 5 years or so.
There are, too, I know when I was at Miami, and I don't know if it's this way at UK, if you look at the graduate school, in other words, you apply to the graduate school, in most schools, to be accepted as a graduate student. Then you have to apply to the department
Right.
to be accepted into that department, into a program. So I think that's still probably the way they do it. You would apply to UK to be a graduate student at UK. They would accept you. Then you would and sometimes you're doing it at the same time.
Yeah, it's
then-
just sort of a matter of sending application materials to 2 different places, and they tell you which ones
So
to send
there's a
where.
possibility someone could be accepted to be a graduate student and not get into the department they want. That wouldn't be a good thing.
Yeah.
But the other thing you might look at is the graduate catalog, or talk to people at the graduate school admissions. Sometimes there are assistantships. Sometimes there are just tuition waivers that some people qualify for without assistantships. And sometimes there are assistantships outside of the department.
Yeah, that's
Like,
right.
for example, at a library.
Yeah. Or working at the graduate school. UK Graduate School has graduate
Yeah.
student assistants.
So you might check those, and those will be particular to the school. There might be opportunities outside the history department, let's say if you're applying to history.
And in other departments, like in the Gender and Women's Studies department, you could get an assistantship there. Or in African American Studies or something, you could get an assistantship for them. But those you have to look for. From your own department, they kind of help you with. Outside of that, talk to the graduate school, get to know people. That's what you do.
We got time for one more question. Okay?
Are those assistantships like competitive, or do they have enough funds for like all the students, or do you have to like apply for those assistantships as well?
The outside of the department?
No, the inside the ones.
Yes, they're competitive, regardless of whether they give them to all students or not. Because if you apply to a department that offers assistantships to every student that they admit, they're going to admit fewer students. So it's competitive that way. But if you get in, then they'll fund you. Other departments like UK, although this is changing, they're moving toward only funded students. But when I applied UK, it is competitive. People with stronger applications are more likely to get assistantships their first year. Now, if you sort of prove yourself and also network, get to know people, show that you're a really good student, produce good work, then you can get an assistantship maybe your second year. But it is competitive either way. So, okay.
All right, let's thank Rachel for her time.